It's Iowa Football Media Day. We hear from Kirk Ferentz and some important news and notes. Spencer Lee, his chase for gold falls just short. Plus Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report talking Iowa football all today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked on Hawkeyes Podcast. Thanks for making Locked on Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs have finished up, the sports just stop sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Kirk Ferentz met earlier this afternoon with the assembled media over in Iowa City. Unfortunately, work duties precluded me from making my way over, and I'm greatly disappointed on that. Always one of the fun events of the year, getting geared up for the football season. Chance to talk to some of the young guys, and that's actually happening as we speak right now. But Kirk Ferentz, and a conversation with Kirk with the press corps over in Iowa City. I think some important information about this football team. There was a couple of interesting moments. And if you've been listening here, if you've been watching for the last 26 years at any level of it, you know, for the most part, what you're going to get out of a Kirk Ferentz press conference, right? There's going to be old stories. There's going to be blasts from the past. There's going to be that steel trap memory that he has in remembering circumstances of games and moments. And he had one of those today talking about the Cleveland Browns and being 7-2, making their way to Philadelphia, all those different things that you're going to get out of Kirk Ferentz. And you have to dig a little bit more than some coaches. You have to try to find exactly that information. What is important? What are the things that we really need to pile away? And I got a few of those here for you today. He talked about first later in the press conference, towards the end of it, in fact, injuries. He brought it up himself. Talk about an old guard. You know, one thing we've been hearing about Kirk Ferentz is he does seem a little bit different. The pressure with the son on staff, just all the arrows that were being pointed at the Ferentz family that he saw. And it seems like a much looser Kirk Ferentz that we've seen going back to spring football in Indianapolis for Big Ten football media days. It just had that look that this is a guy that is maybe a little bit more at peace. Now, it also helps when you have a football team like we anticipate this Iowa football team is going to be as well. We anticipate defensively they're going to be much better. I think you can feel some confidence coming out of this. Leadership, something that Kirk talks about a lot. He's very excited about the leadership that he has and goes from there. Another nugget that you have to take out, Phil Parker is going to be out. Didn't give the full details. Sounds like maybe he got rolled up on. Had to have shoulder surgery. So Phil will not be out there for the rest of the day today. And then tomorrow at Kids Day and the open practice, doesn't sound like he's going to be there. What does that mean? Something to keep an eye on at the very least. And maybe some more coaches getting their duties out there. And if something ever happens with Phil Parker, having that backup plan of who's going to take over calling plays and the like. Also, another note, Seth Wallace has a new role, basically just changing the role from the recruiting coordinator. Now he's the football GM. And that's what it is in today's environment of college athletics. You're not a recruiting coordinator because there's a whole lot more that goes into it, including the finances of it. And general manager, I think, is a title that makes a whole lot more sense. At the quarterback position, no surprise, it is going to be a quarterback situation that Cade McNamara's 1, Brendan Sullivan's 2, as we've told you. Some people believe that that gap is pretty close. From what I've heard, that is not the case, that the gap, at least as the thrower of the football, is still pretty significant between McNamara and Sullivan. Here's the great news, though. Regardless if you think it's a close race or not, you have 2 competent Big Ten quarterbacks, something that they didn't have a season ago. Cade McNamara, health compromised a year ago, and you saw some of the issues that obviously cropped up there in the limited time we got to see him. And then what happened afterwards, which is a different conversation. One of our biggest questions of the offseason has been about the depth of the defensive line. And this Iowa defense is going to stay playing at the elite level, not just good, but elite, top 10 good throughout the course of the season. They need to have depth at defensive tackle. I think we're all pretty encouraged by what we have out of the 4 starters up front. But then after that, he brought up Jeremiah Pittman. That is uber important because when you talk about the defensive line as a whole, yes, there's not a ton of depth there, at least that we know about at this point in time. The other component, though, across the line, yes, it's one thing. Specifically at defensive tackle, though, I think it goes to another level. They need Jeremiah Pittman to be an impactful guy this year, a guy that can not just be out there and taking reps, but be a guy that's doing exactly what it is. Playing defensive tackle at Iowa, it's not fun. It's not for everybody. It's a lot of dirty work. It's occupying space. It's occupying blockers and then allowing the guys around you and behind you to make plays and get those tackles. Look, the likelihood that we're going to see a defensive tackle put up some numbers like the Don Sue or something like that, just not going to happen. The scheme will not allow that to happen, regardless of how talented a guy is at the defensive tackle position. Y.A. Black, monster of a man, showed great versatility throughout the course of last season. The improvements that we saw out of him through the course of last year, I think was one of the biggest growth stories that we had during the 2023 football season. And now we need Aaron Graves to take that jump forward, to take that big leap going into this season. We've seen it at times, but the consistency, being able to do it rep in and rep out, that's going to be important. And if Pittman becomes that number 3 guy, all right, now you're cooking with something. You figure out number 4 from there, and away you go. Also brought up Llewellyn, who we've seen a little bit of the kid from Urbandale, along with Brian Allen, who the upside is immense. It's got to be consistency. That's what we continue to hear at Brian Allen, but at least some names and then developing the depth back behind that. Let's see what else we got in our notes here today, talking about the press conference, from Kirk Ferentz. Freshmen were brought up. He didn't bring up anybody specifically. That's nothing that you really worry about. Oh, back to the injuries. LaShawn Williams is the guy that he did mention that is out there at the running back position. So he is out right now, said all soft tissue injuries. There's about 4 or 5 of them. So that's what we're looking at right now. And the biggest name is LaShawn Williams. It brings me back to a point that I've made before, and every dayers, my love of the upside of Caleb Johnson. And I think that this guy has a combination of power and speed that we haven't seen in so long in Iowa City. Mentioned, in fact, at yesterday's program, he's just so talented. He's got to do all the right things there. And maybe this is what it takes, for him to do everything, do what is asked, and do what we saw out of him, and maybe even more than what we saw during his freshman campaign. Speaking of injuries, also Cohen Entringer, who looked like it was going to be a pretty significant injury that he's sustained. He's back out there practicing. He's not tackling yet, but he is out there practicing. And that's a guy talking about the depth at defensive back. Definitely going to need him and his versatility. Is he a cash guy? Is he a guy that's a backup at the safety? If there is an injury at safety, does that mean that Sebastian Castro moves back? What route are they going to go if there is an injury? The likelihood there probably will be at some point throughout the course of the season, and figuring those things up. So those are just a couple of the high water marks that I had on the press conference notes from Kirk Ferentz and talking with him. We'll talk with Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. He's in Iowa City for Big Ten football media, for Iowa football media days. We'll talk with Tom, a little football conversation with Tom Kakert. Plus, Spencer Lee doesn't finish the way that he wants in the Olympic Games with the silver medal. We'll talk about that as well. We roll through. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But the playoffs have finished up in the spring and summer sports. We know what it is. We're just getting fewer games. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. You can look at a couple of their games of the year in college football, including Iowa State, the Hawkeyes at Kinnick Stadium, a 2.5-point favorite against the Cyclones. More games there. You can bet on Iowa to make the college football playoff, to win the Big Ten. Heck, you can bet on them at FanDuel to win the national championship, and a whole lot more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long, with a boost or a bonus each and every day. Head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes, and we're joined by Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Before we get Tom in here, want to let you know about the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the football field with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And here's Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report.
So let's just the 411 on Kids Day. What time does it start? And, just going by past years, what do you expect, or what can people that make their way to Kinnick Stadium tomorrow, what do you believe they're going to be able to see?
Yeah, doors open at 10, and I think they'll get underway at 11. And, it's kind of a modified practice. It might be one of the first times they've actually practiced at Kinnick. I'm not sure that they've done that yet. So for the young freshmen, it's the eyes are a little wider probably tomorrow. One of the cool things tomorrow, and if fans are coming over to do, is they do kind of a modified swarm thing coming out of the tunnel with all of the kids' captains, with the senior football players before, just as practice gets going. So it's a really cool moment to see all those kids and everybody's, they're playing back in black when these kids come out. So they get like the whole, run through. So I think that's, fans want to see something pretty cool. I'd encourage them to come early enough to do that.
Topic A, number one, is going to be everybody will have their eyes on the offense. Cade McNamara coming back from the injury and the like. It is going to be modified. We're not going to see the full complement, obviously, of what we anticipate we're going to see in game one against Illinois State. However, what are some of those aspects, the kind of individual pieces of the offense you're going to be keeping your eye on the closest coming up tomorrow?
Well, I'm going to focus on the passing game probably a lot. Just receivers, how Cade McNamara, how Brendan Sullivan looks. I've heard that Sullivan is the clear number 2 now. So I think, I don't think anybody would be surprised by that bit of news. But yeah, I think he's going to be one of the guys to watch, see what he's doing, and see what those wide receivers are doing. Jared Bowie and Caleb Brown and Dayton Howard, Seth Anderson, Caden Witchen. You want to see all those guys and see what they're doing offensively. I'll tell you, and it's early. It is early, and they have just been going against themselves. But I've heard really good things about the offense, that they're actually moving the ball. And I know everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I'll believe it when I see it," and I'm probably with them. But there just seems to be a buzz about them having some sort of, good offense, a decent offense. Right. And boy, wouldn't that be wild?
Yeah, something you haven't experienced in some time. It's weird, right? To to be even talking like this. Jared Bowie's the name. There's always one every year, Tom. I mean, you've run Hawkeye Report message boards forever. Whether it be part of On3 or prior to it, the rivals. And there's always one player that stands out and becomes an internet legend. It seems like it's Bowie, but it seems like this one you might be able to, see the proof in the pudding, as opposed to it hasn't really materialized with some of those players in the past. But Bowie's, he's got some buzz, does he not?
Yeah, he does. And there was some buzz for him last year even. So, and I think he battled a little bit of injuries last year, but I think he's got a chance. And Cade McNamara from what I understand, looks terrific and really taken off from a leadership perspective, and just feels like he's healthier than he's ever been in an Iowa uniform. And that's, something that we never saw him really healthy last year. So I think that's just another thing to watch, is what he can do, fully healthy, and the offensive line is healthy. You knock on wood with that one a little bit, because there always seems to be somebody that's dinged up, but apparently the lines looked really good, and just offensively they've looked very good.
That is something we don't say very often in August, regardless of the talent for the offensive team for the Iowa football program. All right, Tom, one other guy I want to get your perspective on. It's a guy that I'm waiting for. It's Caleb Johnson, the running back who burst onto the scene 2 years ago as a freshman. The size, the combo of power and speed that he has, and it just didn't happen last year. Had the big kick return to begin the ball game, to begin the season. They scored a touchdown a play later on the Seth Anderson reception. And Caleb, he was kind of on ice after that. I know he was banged up. There's also some other elements, though, kind of being completely in. I continue to hear about Caleb Johnson. What have you heard about his camp? Because LaShawn Williams is a nice running back, but that's what he is, a nice running back. Caleb Johnson has a chance to be special.
I agree.
He does. He's just, and it's got to be the production meets the look kind of thing, the potential, I guess is probably where production meets potential. And this is a big year for him because I think we all have seen the potential. We've seen some of these plays that he can make on this roster. I don't think there's any back on the roster that's like him that can do things like he can from a speed and power perspective. I tell you, the guy, I mentioned him before, but Kamari Moulton, this guy to watch. Yep. He's just keep an eye on him.
Florida
Trent
kid, right?
Heard something about yeah. And Trent may have heard some stuff, but I heard Brevin Dahl's been pretty impressive so far, and he's maybe working a little bit at wide receiver too.
He's working a lot of bit at wide receiver, from what I have heard. Yeah, he's getting a lot of work there. Kind of that Terrell Washington Jr. role that they carved out this spring.
Are they roommates?
Yes, they're roommates right now in camp. So, he's doing that hybrid thing. So I keep an eye on him because
kick returner.
Maybe. Maybe. Boy, it's a good place to utilize some speed, isn't it?
Well, Weegan can fly.
Yes. There's another one. Who's going to be the punt returner? Is it going to be Caleb Brown, or do you think it'll be Weegan that'll be back there?
I think it'll be Weegan. I think he's going to be back there. That's just gut feel. They put him back there last year. Right. And so I just, we're not going to see Caleb Brown the first game anyway. So
that's true. Yeah.
He'll be sidelined.
How popular will Tim Lester be today?
Oh my gosh. Very popular, I would guess. Yeah. Everybody's going to want to talk to him about the offense and get his thoughts on where things are. So, it's going to be being interested to get his thoughts. This will be his first media day here, so we'll get some thoughts from him on how that offense is doing so far.
And how excited will Kirk be not to have to answer questions about his former offensive coordinator, right?
Or the drive to 325.
Or that,
I'm guessing he's probably going to be pretty happy that he doesn't have to deal with that anymore.
It'll be a little lighter, maybe, media day coming up this afternoon. With that, Tom, we talked about some of the question marks with this team. Defensive line, what have you heard on camp of building that depth? You look at the starters, they're guys guys I think with a lot of upside on there, but the depth of defensive line, what have you heard?
To me, it's the biggest question mark on the defense for sure, and it's not even close. And maybe the biggest question mark next to the offense, really, and maybe the wide receiver position is that defensive line, and it might be more important than that anyway, because they've got to have some depth there. And I talked to Kelvin Bell about it this summer when we had him on our podcast, and they feel good about Max Llewellyn. They feel okay about Jeremiah Pittman, but beyond that, and that's 5 and 6 on the line, they got to get some more depth. They've got to have 7, 8 guys that they can go to. And right now it's probably 6 at best, maybe 5.5. And you can't live in the Big Ten. We saw that for the old war horses. We go back to 2010 and watching just 4 guys basically play the whole game and seeing an exhausted Adrian Claiborne chasing Dan Persa around in Illinois.
Those were the days where I wonder, Tom, is there any discussion? I mean, it's an off-season topic for the coaches, if indeed it is now. I mean, they're on to Cincinnati right now. But does the playoff come up, and I wonder if they've bannered around, or the players, what's it going to take to be one of the Big Ten representatives, whether it be 3 or whether it be 4? Do you think that's even a conversation piece at any point during the off-season?
I doubt it, but I'm just of the opinion of, if you're in the SEC or the Big Ten and you finish with 10 wins and 2 losses, you are automatically in the conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
It's just how it is. I mean, there's just it's going to be hard to leave out a 10-2 team. You could, but it's just going to be a challenge. I mean, but that's going to be the fascinating thing. If this Iowa team can get to a 10-2 season, boy, you could have a last game. I'm looking out at Kinnick Stadium right now. I'm standing in the press area.
Wouldn't that be
out.
something?
I mean, it'd be crazy if that happened, It'd be wild.
Tom, switching off of football here for a moment over to basketball. Big news in your neck of the woods, and our new friends that are listening to us in the Quad Cities, they'll be able to see a game for the first time in a long time there in the Quad Cities. Now, you told us about this, about a month and a half ago, that it looked like this was going to be in the works. Fill us in on the details as Wazoo makes its way to Quad Cities. Yeah,
the Pac-2 is coming to the Quad Cities, right? One of the 2 numbers. The Wazoo is coming, and it's a cool thing. And I think part of it is obviously Brock Harding, Owen Freeman from Moline. So literally the arena is like a 5-minute drive from Moline High School, and maybe about a 3-minute drive to Wharton Fieldhouse, where they played all their home games. So, it's going to be cool it'll save on my gas that day. I don't have to drive very far.
Something to be said for that. Did you hear?
It's cool that they're playing these. It's cool they're playing these neutral site games. I mean, it's just, it's hard to get people to come to Harper Hawkeye and do home and homes and all that stuff. But, they're playing Utah State, they're playing Utah, they're playing Wazoo. So they're playing some decent teams that will help their resume as we go into sort of what college basketball has to be now, is you got to play these type of games.
Back to football. One on Aaron Graves arrived with all the expectations. Freshman season, just, he's a freshman, playing defensive line in the Big Ten. Cut him some slack. Last year we saw some steps. What are the steps that they expect to see out of Aaron Graves this year?
Yeah, and I think early on last year, and I think he would tell you, he struggled a little bit, just kind of didn't take that next step that they were hoping for. But I from what I've understood, he has really amped things up. He's taken that step. He's growing as a leader as well, and I think he's going to be a guy that the folks are going to want to pay attention to this year. I think he's really moving in the right direction. How about that kid, though? He's already graduated he had the community college degree before he even stepped foot in Iowa City. He graduated from the University of Iowa already.
Wow.
And he got engaged, so he's getting married too. I mean, how about that guy? He's like a 30-year-old man at 21.
He's more grown up than I am already. There's no doubt he's half my age. And that's what you get out of Aaron Graves. Another guy I think that's going to be popular is Reese Dakin, taking over for Tory Taylor. The importance of that position for Iowa football, even if they're improved offensively, we're not going to be talking about the Oregon offense here. This is still going to be a team that's going to have to win games in the margins, as they like to say up north. So with that, Tom, Reese Dakin, remember, Tory Taylor showed up. He was 23 years old. He also got to go in 2020 when there was nobody in the stands. Yep. This is a different environment for a much younger guy in Dakin.
Way different environment. And that's going to be the challenge for him, is that, again, he has not kicked in stadiums in front of a bunch of fans. He got a little bit of that this spring, but it's nothing like it's going to be on August 31st. And then when he goes on the road and has to kick in those situations, you can't manufacture that. You just have to live through it. So, but he seems like he's a pretty mature kid for being as young as he is. I mean, he just does just carries himself that way, and I think he learned a lot from Torrey. So I think he's going to be okay, but there might be maybe a couple clunkers on the way. We'll see.
Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com, our Friday conversation with the man behind On3 Media and the Hawkeye site on the Hawkeye side of things. Wrapping things up, Locked On Hawkeyes, and a disappointing end to an incredible run at the Olympic Games. Spencer Lee, his quest for gold comes just short. We'll do that as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Gametime and the Gametime app. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball and makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. They have views from your seat, and of course, their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I love the ability to see exactly where you're going to be inside the stadium, inside the arena, wherever you're going before you even get there. Before you buy those tickets, you can see it with seat views, and they're all in pricing, gives you the total up front. No more surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find comparable seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for Major League Baseball and a whole lot more with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That'll get you $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. For people that missed it earlier in the week, want to remind you once again, my radio show that you can hear from 12 until noon here on 106.3 KXNO has expanded, and we are now statewide. We have joined up with 4 other radio stations across the state. You can hear myself and my radio partner, Ken Miller, talking sports each weekday from noon until 2 on 106.3 KXNO in Des Moines. In Eastern Iowa, you can find us on 95.7 FM, 800 KXIC in Iowa City, and over in the Quad Cities as well. Plus 620 out of Sioux City for the people over on the west side of the state. You can also catch it every day on the iHeartRadio app, or you can listen to the podcast. All right, wrapping things up in Spencer Lee. That stunk. It was happening during the middle of my radio show, and it was tough. It was tough to see somebody that has brought us so much joy as Hawkeye fans, a guy that persevered through injuries, knowing what he went through, winning a national championship without an ACL, just all that he has gone through, but knowing that ultimately it was about chasing the Olympic gold. And how good he looked in both the quarterfinal win and the semifinals yesterday, the domination that he showed, and to not be able to get it done. Did he out-wrestle the young man from Japan? I thought so. The takedown, that the first one from the Japanese wrestler, Lee was right there. There were a couple of near push-outs in the third period, and that can be frustrating. But he knew going into it, after it was tied up 2-2, that he was going to have to get another takedown, final 10 seconds. He was aggressive and got taken down for a second time. That wouldn't have mattered, though. If you're kind of wondering about the scoring and thought that maybe he gave up a takedown in the final couple of seconds and that was the difference, he would have lost on criteria in the end, even if it was tied up 2-2 after that. So we could argue, should there be overtime? Should it be? It's the way the wrestling rules have been and the way that they've been written for a long time. I'll mention this earlier in the week as well. Look, I'm a folk style guy. That's all that I really know in the wrestling world. And because of that, some of the freestyle stuff, the nuance that is involved with it, it is well over my head. I know there's a lot of people out there much more well-versed in the freestyle that can probably explain it a whole lot better, but it was tough. It was tough to watch that. And I'll tell you, the anticipation, just getting ready for the match, watching him make his way out there, it was really fun, really cool. And he becomes the 11th medalist now in Iowa wrestling history. Pretty good accomplishment there as well. It's not what he wanted. He'll come back 4 years if he chooses to. At that point, he'll be 29 years old. He'll have some more international competition at that point under his belt. And I would not be betting against Spencer Lee getting it done in Los Angeles coming up here in 4 years. Thanks again for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Also, want to mention our friends over at Locked On College Football and the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to the ever and never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin, he gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description of this feed, so you don't need to search anymore. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up over the weekend, we got Kids Day on Saturday. Looking forward to that. Tomorrow, we'll have plenty of news and notes coming out of that one. Also, some things from Media Day, different players, different coaches, plenty on that front. We'll also get that to you here over the weekend before we ramp things up next week and what'll be another busy week as we continue to rip those days off the calendar and get us ready for football season. Oh, boy, just a little over 3 weeks away from the opener against Illinois State. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Go Hawks.